Guild certified. I'm a Guild certified Feldenkrais practitioner, and that's where we're here tonight to sort of do some Feldenkrais explorations in sitting. So if you're sitting, like I'm in a chair, and if I sit back where you really can't see me unless I tip it down, but you know, if you wanted to sit so that I can see you in sitting, then that's what you would do, is something like that, or you could be at an angle. So that's my first thing I'll say, is just that when you sit, then we can see what's happening, and if I need to, then I'll do that. I'll give you a couple instructions first, and then I'll get into some other things. So the other thing about sitting in a chair for Feldenkrais is that we sit at the, now you see my notes, but let me see. We sit on the edge of the seat. So here I am, and I don't want to sit back like this, because here my thighs are what's meeting the chair or the surface. And what I want to do is come to the edge of the seat so that my sit bones are on the edge of the seat, and then my thighs are sort of hanging off. And there's several reasons for that, but the best reason for that is that you have more support. If you sit back and your thighs are meeting the chair, then your thighs are kind of holding you up, which people do all the time. But if you're sitting on your sit bones, S-I-T-Z, it's actually a real word, it's not just like sitting down bones, then you have a different kind of support in your base, because and I would like your feet on the floor. You might take your shoes off. That's up to you, but you might, actually it's a good idea to take your shoes off. So the other reason to sit on the front edge of the seat is that your feet are on the floor. If you're very, very tall, then you might want to put a pad under you. The reason for that is that I prefer that your knees are under your hips when you're sitting, so that your knees are not, you know, a lot of reclining seats, they tip us back. This is not a situation to be tipped back in. This is a situation you almost feel tipped forward, so that you're more upright, kind of how our bodies work. So the Feldenkrais method is, I have to say, first of all, that the most difficult thing about it is the name, Feldenkrais. What did someone said? It rhymes with paradise. But Moshe Feldenkrais was Israeli. He was a nuclear physicist. He was a judo expert. He spoke 9 languages. I believe he was born in Russia. I'm not sure. He went to Palestine. He went to France. He went to England. He worked with different armies. He was incredibly educated at a very young age, and very self-motivated and self-directed. And he came up with this movement method at the point that he had a knee injury. And he was told by the doctors that he should have surgery. And he didn't want to have surgery. His wife was a pediatrician, and he knew from judo that grown adults can move like children. And so he sort of took what he knew of physics and motion, vectors in movement, and the human body, the anatomy of the body, because he was a scientist. And he began to play with different ideas, combining these disciplines. And he essentially came up with what we now call neuroplasticity. He, this was probably in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when he was really developing this. And he believed that you could keep growing your whole life, that your movement could always improve. Maybe it will never be perfect, but there's always improvement. And he believed that a diagnosis didn't necessarily limit you for life in terms of movement. That now we know this, that the brain, other parts of the brain will pick up and sort of fill in some holes so that you can learn to move different things, or you can have functions that you lost. And he intuited this somehow when he designed this method. And at first he just was doing this for himself. And some of his judo pals said, "Hey, I thought you had a bad knee. What happened?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I'm doing this." And they said, "Do it with them." And that was hands-on at first. He was, just sort of manipulating gently, hands-on. And then they said, "Teach other people." And he began teaching it. And then he had so many people that wanted to learn it at a time that he began to create group lessons, which are called awareness through movement. So if it's one-on-one, it's called functional integration, that's hands-on, or private lessons. And awareness through movement lessons is like you all. I'm going to give you some mini awareness through movement lessons. And the word awareness and movement are very important in this method because it's not exercise. You're not bulking up. Nothing is repeated just to be repeated. Every movement is its own movement. And I will try to repeat that again. So that what happens is if you bring awareness to something as you're doing it, your brain learns quite differently than if you just repeat something. I mean, your brain learns if you repeat it. What I think we call that a habit, right? We repeat things and our brain learns it. I'm gonna try these glasses. And so that actually is a lot of what Feldenkrais was looking at is our habits. So we have habits of movement. If I reach my arm, watch, I might reach my arm up like this because I injured it, which I did 30 some years ago. And when this was injured, I started using my shoulder for everything. And then my shoulder got injured. And so I might do that but that is not efficient movement. I'm using a lot more muscles than necessary. So if I want to just bring my hand out like this, now it's much simpler. You can almost hear my voice is different. I can feel my breath in my belly, and I don't feel my breath in my belly here. My breath is up here. So the breath is, of course, just a way to gauge how we are moving. But let's just do a few things, and I can, let me see if I want to say anything else before I start. Well, so I came to Feldenkrais really via Tai Chi. I went to New York City in the early 90s to get a Master of Fine Arts. I'm an artist as well. And I fell into Tai Chi and I fell in love with Tai Chi. And Tai Chi, I say, put me back in my body. And little did I know that my beloved Tai Chi teacher was a Feldenkrais student for some 30 years. But when I fell into Feldenkrais, it made complete sense because the way that she taught Tai Chi was very congruent with what I was learning in Feldenkrais. So I just found an online program and I took a class. And after that class, my body felt as light as it used to feel when I did Tai Chi all the time. And so I went down to New York I hung out for a week in a studio in the city, and I never stopped going. I went just to see what it was like for a 1-week exploration, and I stayed for 4 years of training. And that's how I became a practitioner. So also what you should know about practitioners is that we have a guild. There's a Feldenkrais guild that's international, and they have standards that we need to achieve when we study, and we need to maintain certain standards and continuing education and get recertified every year. So those are just some important things there. So now wherever you are, I can see some of you, which is great. I'm just going to ask you to turn around as if someone's calling you from either side. You choose the side. If someone's calling you from one side, which side would you turn to if someone's calling you? And then come back to the front. The front we'll call neutral. And now turn to the other side and see what that's like. And you may discover why you didn't choose it the first time. So now come back and turn to the first side again, but I'm going to ask you to notice how you're turning. Are you turning fast? Are you turning through any glitches? I call sticky spots, like clunk, clunk, clunk. I mean, are you turning to see how much you can turn, or are you turning for how easy it is? So go ahead and turn again much more slowly, and you may just turn a little. So when you turn your head this time, just sense inside yourself where it's really easy, where you still are in your base of support, with you still feel your sit bones and maybe your breath. So your head isn't going to whip around. We often just whip around. And a lot of that is habit. Our habit is to do more than necessary in terms of movement, because of course, many of us were raised with the idea of mind over matter, and you push through and no pain, no gain. But what happens is if I have an injury here and I turn my head and I keep turning through my injury, I will no longer sense I am creating pain. But if you move slowly, then you start to, if you can feel where the beginning of sticky or pain or discomfort is, and you stop, you don't go on, you don't go through it, not while you're learning. You know, if you're a martial arts practitioner and you're doing a big fight, yes, you're going to go fast. But for learning, what Feldenkrais said, slowing down, making small and slow movements is the best way for your brain to pay attention. And I think it's true. Now, often slow things like meditation, some people, you feel like you're falling asleep because our minds are bored. So what's interesting about this method is that, I mean, hopefully the mind is engaged, but really it's your brain that's listening. So turn your head really slow and small. Just turn your head 1/8 of an inch and notice if there's tension anywhere. Notice your breath. Just start to turn your head just a little. You can even put your hand under your chin and just notice if you're tight under there or loose under there. This is just a little idea of something. But the other question is, when you do this, do you sense tension? Are your eyes pulling you out? Are you holding your breath? So that's just one little question there. And here's now, so just pause that, put your hands down on your knees, on your lap. You're sitting on the edge of your seat. Turn your head one way and the other and decide which side is easier. Which side is easy, easy, easy. It's not how far you turn. It's easy, and you don't need to do a whole lot, so it's not a big deal. Just choose one side, okay? Or I can even give you a side for that matter. But you know what? I'll do that. I'll give you a side so that you don't need to worry about it. So I'd like you to turn to the right. I'll just do that, and just make sure you're breathing. Just turn a little, not all the way. Begin to turn your head so your eyes are coming with your nose to the right, and then come back to center. And now your knees are here. Please have your ankles under your knees so that your legs aren't spread wide apart. Your legs are not stuck together. Your feet are not crossed. If you want to know what you can do for that, this is really great. You can even lift up your own leg and drop your foot. And if I lift up my knee and drop it, my ankle will fall under my knee. It's a really interesting trick that's really great. And then, I have people who've really protected their knees it's very different for us to sit with our ankles under our knees, especially women. Of course, it all depends on your pelvic, how your pelvis is made up, because all of our hip joints have different angles in them. But this is a baseline to start with. So now with your ankles under your knees and your feet on the floor, please just bring your right knee forward. Your right knee just moves forward just a little bit. Maybe I'll try to do this. Okay, so just bring, let's see, here I am. Just bring your right knee forward. Just a little, very little, and then back. When you come back, you just stop. And again, bring your knee forward again. And then you go back and you stop on your sits bones. And each time you bring your knee forward, so you continue this just a little bit, you pay attention to where you feel tension. Bring your knee forward and breathe. And notice that as you bring your right knee forward, your left knee goes back. Notice that? So if I bring my right knee forward, my left knee goes back in space, because my pelvis is turning. So to bring my knee forward, the other one goes back. You might even feel it in your sit bones. You can feel your sit bones moving forward and back. Now that you've done this right here a little bit, actually you can do the other one. Now bring your left knee forward and let your right knee go back a little. So I'm bringing my knee forward, but my pelvis is turning. You don't have to try to turn your pelvis. Just think about lengthening the knee, not over the toes, but just bringing the knee forward and back on the chair. And then wiggle a little. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Your legs a little bit. Keep your knees the same distance apart as your feet are, okay? And here, this is really fun, but I'm gonna give you back my face so that you're not just looking at my legs. Bring your hands together and interlace your fingers. And to the same side, turn to the right, I guess. Turn your head, turn with your hands interlaced like that. And notice when you do this, keep your eyes and your nose in line with your fingers. And notice that when you turn to look to the right with your hands like this, your upper body goes with you, right? Come back and just bring your hands down for a second. Bring them down to, because when you first turned, you turned only your head. But when you have all this, your whole self turns. So now take your hands apart and interlace them the opposite way. So that means whatever thumb so you might have to go back to your first one, whatever thumb was on top, you put the other thumb on top. And it's really kind of interesting because it's non-habitual. So go ahead then and do this as well. Turn like but you're not going to yank your head. You're just going to turn and come back to center, and you can turn to the other side. And as you do this, notice if one knee is coming forward a little when you turn. So it's hard to just turn your waist, right? In order for your body to turn, one knee might be coming forward. So you can bring your hands down again and just take a pause. And now go back to the first movement of just turning your head to look, see if someone's calling you, and see what you do when you turn now. Do you turn more of yourself, or do you feel more of yourself wanting to turn? So if you don't, bring your hands back up and interlace them, and someone's calling you and you're turning to hear them. Now, how much of you turns if you have your hands out in front of you interlaced? So because what the Feldenkrais method does is it invites this idea that your whole self participates. So often, like my example, actually I was cutting something with a knife when I first understood this years ago, that my arm hurt. I had injured my arm and I was cutting, and I thought, oh my gosh, how can it be so hard to use a knife? But it was so hard to use a knife because I had compensated for injury by using a whole bunch of muscles that didn't need to be used. But because I had done it for so long, they had become habit. So what the Feldenkrais method says is, really, we develop habits and then we move according to our habits, but the body has an intelligent way of moving, and we just need to relearn it. So if you watch children move, they're so fluid, right? I mean, of course, they have different skeletal structures until they're completely formed, until the skeleton is formed and the head is formed. But children play, they explore movement. So one pillar of this movement is this idea of organic learning. We don't teach children to walk or talk unless there's something in their development that impedes that, unless they have a medical or physical problem that we need to tend to. Otherwise, we let nature take its course. And in fact, Feldenkrais said something really interesting. I'm an oldest child. So he said, oldest children, he thought, often had backaches because the parents pushed them to walk too soon or to stand up too soon. And so those children were putting pressure on in their skeleton and skipping little bits of internal development. It's not that you can't learn to do something. It's just that nature has a path that children follow. Pretty much all children everywhere follow certain pathways to movement, to sit up, to roll over, to crawl, to stand, to walk. You wobble, you try it, you fall, you try again. So children follow, they're following their senses. They're trying something, they're curious. The baby lifts their hand, they're like, oh. Movements. But children also play. And part of play is variation. You try one thing, you try another I hope you can hear me because it says my internet's unstable. So if I disappear, hopefully I'll come right back. So you can let me know if that happens badly. So one thing that happens in the method is you're playing. Play is discovery. It's like, oh, what's going to happen? Play is not, I'm after this result, and if I don't get it, I'm not doing it again. Play is, I wonder what will happen when I explore this. I wonder what will happen if I put my hands together. I wonder what it feels like to put my hands in the opposite way. It feels uncomfortable. So I might not do that all the time. But the only reason it's uncomfortable is because we don't do it all the time, which is kind of interesting. So now wherever you are, and I can't see many of you, but I'm going to invite you to stand up. And so when you stand up, again, the same idea, just turn and look to one side, and then turn and look to the other side. And just when you turn, you can just sort of notice what you see when you turn. But again, don't yank your head. Don't go further than is comfortable. You're just turning a little. And that's good. You don't need to do a lot of it. And now, while you're still standing, with your both feet on the floor, have one foot, shift your weight over one foot. And with the other foot, wobble it like this on the floor. Just, just lift up one side and the other side of lift up like the right side and then the left side. So you wobble your ankle of the other leg. And then you can stop that and shift your weight now to that leg and wobble the second ankle. Side, left side, right side, left side. Just let your ankle wobble. You can still keep it on the floor. You don't need to pick it up. Just lift up the inside, lift up the outside, whatever you can do. And when you've done that, then come back to standing. And now turn around and look to one side and then the other and see if you feel any difference or if you feel something's a little easier. Because we just woke up the ankles. And it's very interesting. I don't know what you noticed, so you can tell me later. But go ahead and sit back down. I find that does give me more mobility. My ankles are funny things anyhow, and they can be weak and they can be fragile. But so what happens is we use our feet and our ankles in ways that get stiff, and there's different stiffness that you get it when you're a little bit older. It happens as well. But something as small as just waking up the ankle gives you a different ability to move. Okay, I'm gonna try to show you this one too, because this one's kind of fun. So this is another exploration. This is for the hip joint. You're gonna sit on the edge of your seat, and you're gonna interlace your fingers behind the knee. So you have one foot solidly on the floor, and the other foot is gonna be a little bit in the air, if you can, and you're lifting your knee up, and your arms are straight, and you're on the edge of the seat so that you rock back, and then you rock forward so that you can feel yourself rocking over that sit bone. And be careful if you have really, sometimes those bones underneath of us can hurt. It depends on what kind of chair you're on, but just rock back and forth so that you feel yourself rocking over what is a sit bone. So you rock back and you go over it back, and you come forward and you go over it forward. And just do that a few times. And what you're doing here is just reintegrating. You're just reminding your brain, hey, this is something that I use all day long, but I stopped paying attention to it if it doesn't hurt. And then just bring that foot down to the floor and come to the edge of your seat and notice if you feel any difference in how you're sitting or in the two sit bones. And I'm going to say this at this point, don't worry if you don't feel a difference, because what the Feldenkrais method is about actually is learning to sense these differences. It's a practice like anything else. Like if you're going to learn an instrument, you learn to hear the notes, right? If you're learning poetry, you learn to hear the rhyme or the rhythm. So we do not often listen to ourselves. We hear ourselves in pain and certain kinds of pleasure. Okay, so pick up the other knee underneath, interlace your fingers under your other knee with your arms straight and rock back and forward on that side. Rock back and forward. And one of your hips may do funky things because they're different. None of us are exactly symmetrical, although we like symmetry. You just rock back and forth if you can. And then let that go and have 2 feet on the floor. And just notice how you're sitting. See what sitting feels like. So just tune into yourself. We've been sitting, we've been doing different things. You sit all day. What's it like to sit on your sit bones after doing that? It's a little subtle, so it just depends on, actually, so you know what I want to do with you, something that I do often anyhow in private lessons and class lessons, is put you, we don't touch ourselves, so just if you're embarrassed, don't worry about it, but most of you, I can't see you. Put your hands under your sit bones. You could do one hand at a time and just feel where those things are that you sit on. They're shaped like a rocker, kind of like this. So there's something right here that you get on and you roll behind it, you get on it and you roll in front of it. So if you have your hands and you can feel what you're sitting on, they're not always symmetrical. One side can be in front of the other. You can just sort of sit on there. You bring yourself forward, on top of it, behind it. See if you can find those sit bones. And one thing you can do is you can think about tipping your pubic bone forward and then come back a little on top of it, and then tip your tailbone down like a dog sitting on its tail. I guess you could say like a cat arching its back. And there's something really interesting if you explore this, which is, so now that you have felt your sit bones, come back down on top of them. Just sit on your chair and see if you feel, even though you're at the edge of the seat, do you feel yourself sitting more solidly or more supported? Or can you breathe a little better? Maybe, maybe not, we'll see. So what else I want to tell you about this? Oh, okay. So what we're doing here is just sort of what we call organization of the body. So it's using a little more of you. Like if I'm sitting and putting my hands under my sit bones to remind my sit bones or my brain and myself, I'm just using more of myself. Even if I'm sitting, I'm using more of myself. If I'm turning with my hands together, not that you want to do that all the time, but it's to remind your system that turning is not just the head. Turning is a whole body movement that we have reduced to the head at great expense to our necks. Because if you turn with more of yourself, it's much more efficient. And nature is efficient. This is what Moshe Feldenkrais said. And I was sort of astonished because I grew up in like the diet culture. You know, you want to burn as many calories as you can, no matter what you're doing, so that you're going to lose weight, or it's just good to do that. But actually, it made sense once I thought about it, that in nature, I mean, if we were out there gathering berries to eat all day and milking our animals and chasing down animals and picking greens, we would want our bodies to be very efficient and not to burn any more calories than we could find out there in nature, right? So we have just come into a different way of collecting things in terms of eating. But so the more energy I use for any movement, the less efficient it is. But the other interesting thing is that it equals inflammation. If I'm using too much energy or too many muscles, if I'm using more of me than I need to, it's heat. Energy equals heat equals inflammation. I mean, it's not, you know, I'm not a doctor, so it's not linear like that, but there's a lot to that the inefficient ways that we use ourselves cause us a lot of difficulty. But how would we know what's efficient? I mean, you know, so this is another thing, is that I think we like to be told, you know, we like the doctor to tell us exactly what to do to avoid all these risks, exactly what can I eat to get my cholesterol in the right place, exactly how many hours do I need to sleep, exactly how dark does it need to be. And of course, we have studies and scientists that are constantly assessing all of these things and giving us information, which, as some of us know, changes, like the whole egg thing. Are eggs good for you or bad for you? Are they good for cholesterol or they don't matter? But what Feldenkrais wants is for you to feel, and I want it as a practitioner, it's for those things to also come from the self, because your body is an amazing instrument. Like, without any attention from you, your body is doing 100 million things right this second. I mean, you have nerves functioning, you have ears and eyes, you have a heart beating, you have blood pumping. There's so much that works in the body without our making it happen. And so we just aren't tuned into a lot of that. I'm quite the believer in, once you begin to work with your senses, if you're an artist, you learn to see more. If you're a musician, you learn to hear more. If you're a new mother, you hear differently. You hear your baby crying. If you start to work with touch, you become more sensitive to touch. And these are things that we had as a child. Because I told you I'm an artist, and something fascinating to me is that if I am in a public space and I begin to sketch someone, they turn around. It's really interesting. They don't even know why they're turning around. They don't know that I'm drawing them, but that sometimes you feel seen. There's a benign being watched, which is probably drawing you, and there's a non-benign. Sometimes people can watch you and it's a threat. But I believe that if we're in our bodies and not in our head, we might actually understand the difference before panicking or reacting. So the Feldenkrais method is about being able to respond appropriately more than react by habit. So if you offer me something and my habit is to grab and be fast, or do I just want to respond? How are you offering this? If you're throwing me a ball, yeah, I want to catch it. But if you offer me a gift, I grew up in a culture where gifts were offered with two hands and you received them with two hands. It was like a little bit of a bow. It's very different, just sort of physicality, expression of gratitude and gifting. And this is, I think, what the Feldenkrais method, it's just a Tai Chi. I felt the same way with it, just as a way of coming back into the body so that the whole self is indeed embodied. But in terms of movement, like when I said we want to know how to do it, posture is one of those things that we want to know how to do. I hurt at the computer, so how am I supposed to sit? And, of course, you want this, they say things like the top of the screen is right about your eye level and your hands shouldn't go too far forward. I am petite. So there is not a chair or a desk for an adult that fits me. There's not a car seat that fits me. I love little kids' tables because I fit, but there's all these things that they say, and some injury comes from that. But what if you were just sitting because you feel yourself breathing the whole time you're working, and you just stay slightly aware of your breath in the background while you're working, so that you notice if you're holding your breath or if you're straining, which does tend to hold the breath. And if this is actually one of the biggest ways to prevent injury, is to be aware of where you are in space. And the way to do that is to know where your ground is, whether you're sitting on your sit bones or your feet are on the floor, or you're standing or crawling. But so I'm using the word posture, but I'm going to change words and use the word acture. So acture is this idea, and children have it. It's hard to get back as an adult, but it's possible, is this idea that whatever is demanded of me, I can respond without preparation. And that's a big order for some of us that have had injuries. If you've had a knee injury, you want to protect that knee. If your shoulder hurts, you want to protect that shoulder. And so we tend to prepare to move. But there is, when I was studying in the city, and then I came back and I fell a couple times that winter, I was blown away. My cat tripped me at the base of the basement stairs. I rolled off of the stair and I landed rolling just like a kid. I was laughing because I just didn't even know, I couldn't have made that happen if I tried. It was because I had spent a lot of time not rehearsing falling, but I'd spent a lot of time in the movements that children do when they're learning to move. And the reason for that is that this idea that we all have holes in our development. Like I mentioned, maybe the oldest child got pushed. Look, we all get pushed. Our education system does nothing if it doesn't push us. We believe in pushing people. I have a kid in college. I want to push him. I want him to push himself. But is that organic learning? You know, the truth is that he needs to be ready when he's ready to push himself so that he has the confidence and the ability to do it. And so these things that we're doing, they sort of bring you that in little ways. So here's another thing that we're going to do here so that you're not just listening to me explain it. Bring your right hand up just bring your right hand up. It's just loose in front of you, like this, just in front of you. And take your hand to your left side. So you're just going to turn sort of to your left with your hand and you just follow your hand. You go to the left and then come back to neutral, which is where you started. And now close your eyes, keep your hand where you have it, close your eyes and imagine that there's a table right under your elbow and you can let go of all that extra weight that you're holding up with your shoulder and neck. So you're in your mind with your eyes closed, your arm is resting on a table and see if you can let go of something. And then open your eyes and take this hand to the right. So you're going to take your right hand to the right, slowly, 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 and then come back to neutral. And again, slowly to the right, and don't go far. You don't have to go far. The question is just what can you do within ease? So it's still easy. And make it small and slow, and you'll build it up. So you come to the right and notice your shoulder behind you. If your shoulder feels tight, then again, imagine the table, or you can even put your other hand under that if you want to. But just notice how your shoulder moves behind you when you take your hand that way. Do you sense your back? Because you're thinking of taking your hand, but your back is working for this to happen, right? So you just take your hand that way. And now come back to the middle and bring your hand down just for a little pause. When I teach an awareness to movement class, they're really like 45 minutes to an hour long, and we're often on the floor, but we take a lot of rests. And we take rest not because we're tired, but for the brain to integrate. So your mind is like, there's not much happening here, but your brain's going, whoa, wait a minute. Wow, I don't do that very often. That's a new place for my arm. That's a new movement. It's a new brain thought. It may not, whether it's a mind thought or not. So we take rests. It's just like sleeping at night, and pauses. And of course, your arm might be tired from holding it up. So bring your arm back up in front of you so that your hand is sort of draped. It's like I'm just like this. My hand is draped. I'm not holding it stiff. It's just kind of in front of me. And this time, take your hand to the right and your head and eyes to the left. Just a little to see what you can do comfortably. And then come back to the middle and try that again, because that's a very different thing. So you're going to take your hand to the right while your head and eyes go the other way. Not a lot. You don't need to whip around. It's never about how much you move. You could move 1/8 of an inch. You could imagine it and it will work, whatever work means. So come back to center now. Again, you might want to let that table, imaginary table, hold your elbow. And now take your hand to the left and your eyes to the right, your eyes and head to the right. And then come back so that they're together, so that your eyes are looking over your hand. Take your time. And again, hand to the left, eyes and head to the right. It doesn't need to be a lot. What we say is if anything is uncomfortable or hurts, imagine the movement and then come back to this neutral center. And now let's do the original movement from when we started this, which is to take your hands to the left and see what happens when you go to the left now. Is there any more ease is what we're looking for. If you take your hand and you turn it to the, just turn that to the left, but your eyes will keep, you're looking with your eyes are on your hand. You keep your eyes on your hand as you turn that way. And then you come back and you can put your hand down on your legs and just take another pause. And sometimes, I can't tell you how many times it's fascinating to me. I had a student whose shoulder was really hurting. So we were doing a lesson and she couldn't do it. She was in pain. I said, just imagine it. And she was so frustrated because she wanted to do the movements. Like, we want to do it. We want to get it. We want to get the benefit. We want to eat that ice cream. But then she told me the next day, she was able to do all kinds of things without pain. And, you know, it was just a delightful surprise. So, you know, I've got one, let's do one more thing that's really great, especially if any of you have bad shoulders, which I'm sure that I'm not the only person who's ever injured her shoulder. This is really interesting. The first thing I want you to do is lift an arm up and just lift one arm, whatever arm you want to, in the air, bring it down, and lift the other arm in the air, down. And which arm is easier? So you might do it just a little bit, not a lot. Don't worry about it. Just listen to your shoulder. I want you to have no pain. So you pick the easiest side. And here's what I'd like you to do now is well, I might do my right hand, but just let your hands hang. You let one hand hang and bring this hand, let the hand hang down by the side, whatever hand you're going to use. And very slowly bring your hand to touch your thigh. And your hand just sort of slides over your thigh and then slides off the thigh. Slides up onto the thigh, off the thigh, and hangs down. Slides onto the thigh so that your hand feels your thigh and your thigh feels your hand, and then slides down. It's a very slow approach to something. And now the next time you bring your hand up onto your thigh, just begin to come up onto your belly. And then you can come back down to the thigh and slide off. And you come back up. You do this in your own time. You can be slower. And I am touching, you're just completely touching like a pancake. Bring your hand to the belly. And you might come back down, but you want constant contact. We don't touch ourselves a lot, but you want to really contact yourself, like you're sensing, you know, it's just you're aware that your hand is there and your body is there. Your hand feels the body feels the hand, and you can start to come up, and you might want to turn your hands up a little bit, but keep your hand on yourself as you come up. So if you jumped, then go back down and come up slowly so that you don't jump, really slowly, so that your shoulder and your arm is following. Maybe come back down again. And notice if as you bring this hand up towards your face, not to your face, towards your face, this is following. So in other words, I'm not lifting my arm. I don't, you know, if you can refrain from lifting your arm, you don't have to get there. There's no place to get to. This is an exercise in your body listening to safety. So you bring your hand up, and if it's okay, you can bring the other hand under the elbow to help at this point. But then you begin to bring the hand up to your face, and maybe you go on towards your chin and you touch your nose, and you keep coming. You can use the other elbow. You bring your hand up until your hand is on your head and your elbow is kind of out in front, right? And then you can and like this, turn your head one way, slowly, not a lot, and back to center. And turn the other way. And of course, because you've got one arm up, one side will be easier than the other. But the idea is that your hand is on your head here as you do this. And now to look down slowly. Let this elbow just start to come down and your eyes go down also just a little. Then you bring the elbow and your eyes back to neutral where it was. Your hand doesn't have to be on your head. If you don't get your hand to your head, you can put your hand on your chest and do the same thing. Okay, so if your hand's on your head, that's fine. If not, then just have your hand somewhere. And what I'm inviting you to do is just look down a little so that your eyes are going down and your elbows going down, and then come back to neutral. And now begin to let your chest look up. Like you're not jumping your eyes to the ceiling. Right here, your chest is going to look up, like your breastbone, your sternum. Let your sternum look up. Not a lot. It could just be looking up that direction. If this is level, it could look up 1/8 of an inch. But with your hand on your head, your sternum look up and your eyes look up, and then come back to neutral and slide your hand back down your face, back down your chest, back down over your belly, back down over your thigh, and let that go and take a little pause. Just breathe. Notice your breathing. You can rock on your sit bones a little bit. Notice if your mind is calmer, or notice if this frustrates you. Either way, all you do is notice it. And there's a lot of power in noticing what's happening without judging it. So there's a lot of power in noticing when we judge ourselves, because most of the time we want to perform. So there's a lot of self-judgment and self-deprecation around what works, what doesn't work, what I can do, what I can't do. And this particular little movement is fascinating, because what I said, it's an exercise in safety. So if you're touching yourself and you're bringing your hand up along your body, your brain is not worried that your arm's going to fall off. Your brain's not worried that your elbow won't go that far. Your brain's not worried that your shoulder can't do it, because your brain feels safe and will stop you where you need to stop. And it's a really interesting thing, because safety is something that we think about. Like, safety means, can I see where I'm going if we're outside, right? But safe is something, as an educator, I also work with children in schools. Safety is something that brings out the best in someone. If you don't feel safe in a classroom, you don't show up as your best self. So safety invites the openness, that invites play, that creates learning. So again, just if your hand is down, just bring your hand up over your thigh, up your belly, kind of up over you until you're top of your head. And now that you're at the top of your head again, do this very slowly and carefully, and judge for yourself what works for you. Look down, your elbow looks down, your eyes look down just a little. Come back to neutral, which is your eyes forward. Now your sternum looks up and your elbow goes up. So this way you're using your back to look up, not just your neck. And this is why there's more safety here, because we will just yank our necks and then come back to neutral. And now, once you come back to neutral, a very small exploration. You could do 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, an inch. You can imagine it. What I'd like you to do is take your elbow down and your eyes up. So your elbow comes down, but your eyes look up. Come back to neutral. And then your elbow up and your eyes look down over your cheeks. And then come back to neutral, and do that really slowly, because differentiating the eyes can mess with the, like vestibular system. It doesn't mess with it, it wakes it up. And if it's been sleeping for a long time, it doesn't know what to do with it. So again, so have your chest look up, eyes look down, eyes, not even your head, just your eyes. And then your elbow down and your eyes look up through your eyebrows. Come back to neutral and bring your hand down very slowly, just some safety. Now, see, if you drop your hand, that's because we have a habit of just doing that. We're not attuned to listening to ourselves. But how would we hold a baby, right? We don't drop a baby. Like, oh, we are the same being. We deserve the same kindness. And I think this method is really about being kind to yourself. It's about taking the time to relearn and to do something that you don't necessarily know how to add up like we add up math, but your brain knows how to add up because it's biological from eons ago. So when he looked at children, he also looked at reptiles, the whole evolutionary history. And when we do something with the eyes like this, like we did it one way here and one way here, I find the eyes to be really powerful. And if you're tired and you're sitting at a desk and you just move your eyes up, if you just move your head down and your eyes up, or your head up and your eyes down, or your eyes one way and your head the other, it'll wake up your whole nervous system in a not an anxious way, but a different way. So there's a few explorations for you. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments, or I would be interested in knowing, I should have you just check yourself in sitting now and see how you feel in sitting. Hopefully you're sitting up on your sits bones. We don't sit up. Sitting up is not pulling up your shoulders. Sitting up is, if you tip back and forward, when you get right on your sit bones, you'll be tallest because your spine engages. It takes some work sometimes to get there. That's some of what I do. But does anyone have any questions or comments? You can unmute yourself, or you can, I guess, raise your hand. I can see some of you, not all of you. I think An can help with this if you do have questions. If you don't have questions, that's okay. Did anyone like something or feel different? Feel more grounded?
I couldn't really tell a difference much with some of the other ones, but I know I had a lot of shoulder tension, and I actually could feel like a reduction in the tension that I had after doing that last exercise, which was really interesting.
Yeah.
But like what you said that like you usually like won't feel it like at first. So like this is definitely something that I want to like learn more about. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? So yeah, this safety thing for the shoulder will really help with reduction of tension, because tension equals pain. Anxiety equals pain. Stress equals pain. So there's a lot of places where we store that. And I'll say this now before people get off. I teach an awareness movement class over Zoom, and I do private lessons. But if you would like to know more about it, or to be on my mailing list for things like this, when I do this, like I sent this out to some of my people who came to support me or came because they were curious, then please put your email in the chat. That will not be on the recording, so no one else will have that, but An will send them to me. You can also look me up on the Feldenkrais Guild website, but that's just, if you would like to know more or stay in touch with me, please do that. And I will make a little video of something in sitting with feet. And so if you send me your email, I will send you that link when I get that, finessed. But are there anyone else have a comment or a question?
Could you actually tell me what are some of the benefits of the Feldenkrais method?
Well, a benefit is like what you just experienced. A benefit is, if I move my shoulder with pain, what I'm doing with the Feldenkrais method is this. Really, I'm finding a way to move without pain. And so this is celebrating what you can do. And by focusing your brain and your body on what can be done without pain or with more ease, then that capacity builds. Because so if it's a shoulder or an arm, I have my fair share of injuries and tensions, and they don't all disappear, but I know that I can find a place of more comfort. And there's a lot to be said for that. The other thing is that it just teaches you, learn more about yourself, so you prevent injury, you become more balanced. I think the best benefit is just learning more about yourself. It's a self-exploration. And it's a positive one, like you feel good, because how we move is how we see ourselves. So Feldenkrais also said it's really about self-image. If I don't move well, my self-image is smaller. I feel less competent, less capable. But if I feel competent and capable and confident in movements, then my whole self-image enlarges in that way. And I think there's just so much value to learning to let go of some of those tensions and to spend time in a class or on your own doing movements that do that. So there's series of, there's like 1,000 lessons. Like if I'm teaching in a class, I don't teach all 1,000. I learn maybe 50 a year and teach those. But they will vary things. Like one might touch your lower back, one might be your knees, your feet. It's integrating all parts of you. So if a lesson is with your feet, it might feel like it's just your feet and your feet are still your feet. But actually, if you so much as move your big toe, that movement goes all the way to the top of your head. You cannot move your pinky without your back. It's just that we aren't aware of those changes. And while you don't want to be hyper aware, it really does help to be able to notice and be in your body more. I don't know if that's answering or not. I mean, the reason I kept going was it felt good. So I just kept going to classes because I felt so good. I mean, in the training program, of course, we were doing it all day long for a weekend or something. And I would come out of class feeling taller. I felt like I walked like a dancer. I mean, even little things I'm noticing when people, if you lift your head or something, lifting your arm, you might just lift your arm like this, but I lift my arm like this. I'm attending, I'm integrating, lifting my arm with my eyes and spiraling my arm back down. So and that's a much more efficient movement than this, which could injure my shoulder. And if I want to, if I want to open here, I can open once. It's a benefit for functional integration, which is the hands-on part. It's all about function. If I want to pull a light bulb, do I just yank up like that? Probably. Or do I twist up until I'm taller and now pull the cord down? If I'm lifting something, do I just lift it or do I take the time to make sure I'm breathing? If I'm breathing, I'm not going to hurt myself. And let me tell you, I hurt myself when I'm in a hurry. And my Tai Chi teacher said it. She said, wait, hurrying up wastes time. And I've come to believe that is profound. Because it's always when I'm in a hurry or just getting the next thing done that I hurt myself somehow. So I don't know if that answers, but please reach out or give me your name in the, in the chat, and I will be happy to talk to you further.